So welcome back, everybody, to the last session of CAN-CWiC 2021. We appreciate you having given up your Saturday to come here to be with us. We much appreciate that. And I have the good fortune to be able to introduce our final speaker. Final speaker is Natalie Crosby, and Natalie is a startup investor and advisor, a community builder, a tech strategy and user experience leader, a coach, a speaker, and the 2020 Top 25 Women of Influence recipient. She's one of the most inspiring people that I know. She's going to share her lessons learned about imposter syndrome and how to deal with it, what to be prepared for in a life in tech, how a tech career is just a smaller part of a bigger, more beautiful whole. And her talk is entitled Empowering Women to Achieve Financial Freedom, Connect to Supportive Communities, and Grow Whole, Fulfilling Lives. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Natalie. Thanks for being here and spending your Saturday with us as well.
Thanks so much, Wendy. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be here with you and talk to you about the importance of financial freedom, of connecting to supportive communities, and of designing a holistic life, not just a great career. So more specifically, by the end of this talk, here are the things that I'm hoping you'll take away. So first of all, why financial freedom is crucial for women and for you to think about now, even though it probably feels like something that's really far away and maybe not even top of mind. Also, how imposter syndrome gets in the way of success and financial freedom, and tips for how to overcome imposter syndrome so that you can feel more free. Secondly, I'm going to have you walk away with the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of tech for women, and how supportive connections and community are keys to thriving in tech. How a tech career is just a small part of a bigger, more beautiful whole, your whole life, and how self-awareness and community are a critical part of designing that beautiful, fulfilling, holistic life. So Wendy covered a little bit of who I am and what I've done. My career has spanned 15 years in tech, including leadership and consulting roles. I've worked in product and user experience and AI. I've worked for large and small companies, from BMO, one of Canada's top 5 banks, and Shopify, to startups in fintech, legal tech, and other sectors. I've also supported startups and women as an investor in SheEO Ventures, as a startup coach for Ryerson University, and as a volunteer strategic advisor for Ryerson University's Tri-Mentoring program. So those are just a few of the things that I've done. So this, combined with the introduction that Wendy gave me right before I started speaking with you, after hearing that list of accomplishments, you might be thinking these accomplishments in that career are impressive. I've been told they are, and you might think that those accomplishments, because of them, I have unfailing confidence. But you'd be wrong about that part. While I intellectually know I've accomplished a lot, that doesn't necessarily translate into unfailing confidence. As an example, when Wendy Powler, who just introduced me, the founder of this conference, reached out to ask me if I would be willing to be the closing keynote, my self-doubt, I like to call her Doubting Donna, reared her head and insisted that I check with Wendy to make sure that she hadn't intended to send the invitation to someone else and sent it to me by mistake. So you see, despite having accomplished a lot and gotten to high levels of achievement and gained the recognition of others, including that Top 25 Women of Influence award, I can still experience self-doubt, otherwise known as imposter syndrome. You may have heard this term, but in case you haven't, or in case you aren't exactly sure what it means, here's the definition. So as you can tell from this definition, during that exchange with Wendy, I was experiencing a classic case of imposter syndrome. Does any of this feel familiar to you? Do any of you ever feel this way? If so, you're not alone. Many of the world's most famous women have experienced it also. Cheryl Sandberg, COO of Facebook, is one of the most quoted examples of imposter syndrome. In her book, Lean In, she said, "Every time I was called on in class, I was sure that I was about to embarrass myself. Every time I took a test, I was sure that it had gone badly. And every time I didn't embarrass myself or even excelled, I believed that I had just fooled everyone yet again. One day soon, the jig would be up." entertainer Lady Gaga admitted in an HBO special, "I still sometimes feel like a loser kid in high school, and I just have to pick myself up and tell myself that I'm a superstar every morning so that I can get through this day and be there for my fans, what they need me to be." And former First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, said in a 2020 interview with Vogue, "For so long, women and girls have been told that we don't belong in the classroom, the boardroom, or any room where big decisions are made. So when we do manage to get into the room, we are still second guessing ourselves. So we're still unsure if we really deserve our seat at the table. We doubt our own judgment, our own abilities, and our reasons for being where we are. Even when we know better, it can still lead us to playing small and not standing in our full power." And she says, "I've been there plenty of times." And they're not the only ones by any stretch. There's many other famous women who admitted to imposter syndrome, including actor and writer Tina Fey, poet and writer Maya Angelou, and many, many more. So why do so many of us experience this? One reason may be because you can't be what you can't see. So we're more likely to experience imposter syndrome if we don't see many examples of people who look like us or share our background, who are clearly succeeding in our field. And according to Brian Daniel Norton, a psychotherapist and executive coach in New York, women and women of color, especially Black women, as well as the LGBTQ community, are most at risk. He says, "When you experience systemic oppression or are directly or indirectly told your whole life that you are less than or undeserving of success, or you begin to achieve things in a way that goes against a long-standing narrative in the mind, imposter syndrome will occur." And sadly, there is a lack of successful women models in many areas of tech, despite the attention that's been brought to the issue in recent years. For example, there's a lack of models of women at the C-suite level. In 2020, female CEOs represented only 7.4% of the top 500 companies on the Fortune 500 list. And that was actually heralded to be quite an improvement over previous years. Of women who are having children and that not impacting their careers. We don't have a lot of examples of that either. Research has shown that women's earnings drop after they have a child, but men's do not. This is otherwise known as the Motherhood Penalty. And according to an analysis of census data by the nonprofit National Women Law Center, mothers in the US are paid 71 cents for every $1 that fathers make. That's about $16,000 a year in lost wages. Now, these are American statistics, but we can assume that there is a fairly similar statistic here in Canada. So without those examples of positive role models of those women at the C-suite, of women being able to have children if they choose to and not having it impact their career or their pay, those positive models of people like us succeeding, whether that's ascending to the C-suite or being able to make the choice to have a child, it's no surprise, as the earlier quote from Emily Hugh put it, that so many of us suffer from imposter syndrome. And research shows that the number of people who experience it are huge. Approximately 70% of people will experience imposter syndrome at least once in their lives, according to a review article published in the International Journal of Behavior Science. And all of this imposter syndrome impacts not only our ability to feel happy and content, but it also impacts our ability to grow our financial freedom. Because if we give in to that voice in our head that tells us that we aren't worthwhile, we don't have what it takes, we shouldn't speak up, then we're going to hesitate to do things that lead us to financial freedom. Things like apply for that job we want that pays a good salary, negotiate that good salary to make it an even better salary, ask for that promotion, advocate for why we deserve that promotion, ask for that raise, ask for the projects that give us exposure to new skills and opportunities that will lead to greater financial freedom. So at this point, you may be thinking, that's so damn frustrating. So tell me, what do we do about this imposter syndrome thing? Well, there's a few things that can help. First, know that if you feel it, you're probably already awesome. Remember that definition of imposter syndrome I showed you earlier? Remember how it read in part, imposter syndrome disproportionately affects high achieving people? So that means that if you feel it, chances are you're probably already high achieving. And remember also that you're in good company. Remember all those famous women, those statistics I shared with you earlier? There are a heck of a lot of us who suffer from this. And that's good news, because relatability, AKA having something in common with others, and vulnerability, which is having and being willing to share something that we struggle with, are two of the three things that bond people and create a sense of intimacy and closeness. In case you're wondering, the third is frequency of contact, but we'll talk more about that when we talk about building our tribe and community later in the talk. So experiencing and sharing that we experience imposter syndrome can be really bonding between women. And besides, a problem shared is a problem halved. Another thing to know is that chances are it will never fully go away, and that's okay. All those women I showed you are so famous. They talked about imposter syndrome at a high achievement point in their career. If they had, they had a lot of proof by then, but still they were feeling it. So it probably will never go away. Remember, if you have it, you're probably a high achiever. And if you're a high achiever, you're probably already doing a lot of amazing things. So take comfort in that. And at this point, you may be thinking, yeah, but I don't want to just live with it. I want to try to make it go away. Okay, there are some things you can do to make its power go away. A mini toolkit for imposter syndrome. So here are 3 tips to fight imposter syndrome. First, share that you feel it with trusted others. Second, notice and integrate and celebrate what you're good at. And third, keep a log of your successes and themes and let that inform what you do. So let's take those one at a time. First, share that you feel it. Who should you share that with? Share it with friends, mentors, trusted peers, people you mentor. You will get to the point of mentoring other people in your career, and you'll probably be a leader at some point if you're not already. So share with those people within appropriate measures. Remember how I shared with you at the beginning of the talk that I can feel imposter syndrome sometimes. Think about the effect that had for you to see my list of accomplishments and still hear that that comes up for me. That's the same effect you'd have for others when you share it. And it also creates a sense of permission for people that they can then share back with you when they also have those types of feelings. Also share it with supportive communities that you belong to. Share the experiences that triggered it and share that you felt it. Now you might be wondering, why should you share this? You might be thinking, won't that be embarrassing? Won't sharing that make me lose credibility? I know that I used to feel that way. But the reason to share it with others is that imposter syndrome is a form of shame, and sharing vulnerably with safe people helps combat shame. Famous vulnerability expert Dr. Brené Brown defines shame as the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. Dr. Brown says that judgment and keeping shameful feelings a secret feed that shame, and the way to let go of shame is to talk about it with each other to help us connect and understand the effect it has on us. I agree with Dr. Brown, and I've actually experienced this effect firsthand. I've experienced how freeing it can be to do that. I had a difficult work situation years ago, earlier in my career, that resulted in intense feelings of failure. I felt so much shame, in fact, that I didn't talk about it to anyone, not even my closest friends. I thought that if they knew, they would judge me and they would distance from me. When I finally, in baby steps, started to open up a little bit about the experience, I found to my shock and surprise that not only did my friends not distance from me and judge me, they actually immediately showered me with love and empathy and support and their own stories of failure, which gave me the feeling of safety to share more. And as I shared, my feelings of shame decreased, and my experience encouraged those I shared with to also share more of their own stories, which bonded us further. I can now talk about that experience without any feelings of shame coming up. I still feel some disappointment, which I think is natural, but the shame has left me. Tip number 2, notice, integrate, and celebrate what you're good at. Really take in accolades. When someone says something positive to you, really take it in, really let it land. So how do you do that? What does that mean to let something land? One way that a mentor of mine modeled that to me was, she said that when she received an accolade or a compliment, she tried to actually pause, and she would try to take a breath in. She would literally take a breath in as though she was trying to breathe the words in. Try it. Then see if you can feel where that lands in your body. Does it feel like a warmth in your chest? Do you feel your shoulders relaxing a little? Do you feel yourself smiling? Notice what it does for you. Let it sink in. We hold so much in that's negative in our bodies, like stress in our shoulders. Why not let our bodies also hold and store the joy for us? Integrate the accolades even further by smiling and saying thank you for compliments like you know you deserve it, even if inside you don't feel you do. Resist the urge to minimize your accomplishments or give away credit that you deserve. Practice owning and celebrating your accomplishments. If you struggle with speaking up about your accomplishments, and a lot of women and people from marginalized groups do, participate in great initiatives like the free I Am Remarkable workshops. I Am Remarkable is a great Google initiative that empowers women and other underrepresented groups to celebrate their achievements in the workplace and beyond. I'm a certified I Am Remarkable facilitator, and I've seen firsthand the confidence boosting impact that these workshops have on people. Find out more by going to iamremarkable.withgoogle.com. Tip number 3, keep a log of your successes and themes and let that inform what you do. If you haven't done this before, you might be wondering things like, what should this log look like? What should you track on it? How should you use it? To illustrate, I'll share an example of a log that I've created and used in my own career, and that I've adapted since then for what I'm focusing on now. This is a high-level overview of the log, and it has a few example rows of content just so that you can understand a little bit how I use it. Let's zoom in and look at those columns in turn. The first 2 columns are the trigger. So what I mean by the trigger is they are either the event that happened or the action I took and the date on which it happened or that I took it. The reason I separate event and action is because events allow me to capture things that I did that maybe I didn't even realize would have an impact. It wasn't an intentional action. It's just some way that I showed up in the world that later I heard back the impact that it had. Whereas an action is something that I intentionally intended to do. So actions tend to be more things that I'm aiming to have an impact with. Next, in the other category, I identify the top categories of skills that I want to be applying on a regular basis. So in the past, for example, when working with others, I would make these main categories, the ones that you see in the gray cells, I would make those the high level roles and responsibilities of my job. And that would keep me accountable. So if I was putting in an action that didn't align with any of those, I would have to ask myself why I was spending time on that. So it would keep me accountable to my goals and to my purpose, and gave me content to discuss with my leader during one-on-ones and my reviews with my leader. Now that I'm doing my own initiatives, I make the categories those that match my current objectives and the value that I'm aiming to provide in the world and to my communities now. Here you'll see all the categories are checked, and that's because I try to make sure that the actions that I'm taking cover as many of my different goals and categories as possible. So in the case of these 3 rows, you'll see that all the boxes are checked, and that's because the actions I'm taking are actually allowing me to be aligned across all of the things that I'm aiming to do. And lastly, I capture the impacts my actions had, both qualitative and quantitative. I also look to capture objective proof. This is especially useful when reviewing with your leaders. So if It's one thing for you to say that you did something that had a great impact. That's not going to carry the same weight as if you were bringing a testimonial from a partner or a colleague or a customer attesting to the impact that you had. And then I also, on a separate document, although you could do it here as well, I track and extract themes of positive qualities and skills that I've noticed in myself. And so I track them both myself, and then I also capture things that I've heard from others. These are examples of things I've actually tracked and heard from others. And then I compile, I notice every time I get feedback, I notice what the themes are. And so that has allowed me over the course of my career, the list is longer than this is just a snippet, but as I started to notice myself, what I was good at and what my skills were, and as I started to notice what the feedback was that I was hearing frequently, it allowed me to really start to hone in on what I enjoyed, what I was good at, and what was providing value out in the world. And then to focus more and more on doing that and on spending my time on opportunities that provided me to do more of that in the world. And so you can see at the bottom, now those inform the categories that I'm tracking, because that's the areas that I'm focusing now in my life. So as a recap for section 1, to recap the 3 tips in your toolkit for fighting imposter syndrome and unblocking your path to actions that will lead to financial freedom. 1, share that you feel it. Share that you feel imposter syndrome with trusted others. Notice and integrate and celebrate what you're good at, and keep a log of your successes and themes, and let that inform what you do. Let it inform your next job. Industry to be in for average salaries. There's also lots of varieties of roles. There's also lots of variety of sectors. You can be in health, you can be, in finance. There's just many different sectors. And there's lots of different contexts. If you like a startup environment, you can work in startup. If you like a big enterprise, a big stable company that's been around a long time, you can work there too. You can be remote, you can be in office, and of course there's a lot more remote nowadays. And it's also really interesting cutting edge work. That's what really drew me to tech in the first place, was I really loved the feeling that tech made so much possible. So these are really wonderful sides of it. Now, unfortunately, there's also some really challenging aspects, especially for women or for people from marginalized groups. So some examples of that, and these are things that I've heard as themes, and some of these things I've experienced. So it's still a male-dominated field, especially at senior levels. Remember that stat about the less than 10% women who are CEOs? That's definitely true here too. It can feel like a boys' club as a result, and the culture of a company can reflect that. It can be hard to see ourselves as women identifying people or marginalized groups, to see models that look like us. That can feed our imposter syndrome, and that impacts our success and our feelings of belonging. The traditional soft skills associated with women can feel undervalued or underrepresented, especially if the leadership tends to be male-dominated. It can also feel like for some women in some environments, they have to be more man-like to succeed and suppress their authenticity and show up in ways that are more traditionally masculine. So what can we do about it? Let me share with you a mini toolkit to flourish in tech that I learned from both what worked and what didn't work over the course of my own career in tech. So 3 tips to flourish in tech. First, work for a good leader in a company with development opportunities. 2, find your tribe, mentors, sponsor, advisory panel, and communities. 3rd, grow your financial freedom so you can leverage the good of tech and feel free to leave if and when you encounter the bad of tech. Now let's take each of those one at a time. First, aim for a good leader and development opportunities. Work for a company that has good leaders. I didn't pay enough attention to this early in my career. And although I've had some wonderful leaders, I've also had experiences where I didn't have wonderful leaders. And I think early in my career in particular, I let the draw of things like the name of the company, the money that the role paid, the role title, the kind of work, those are all very important, but they're not more important than the type of leadership that you're working for. And that was a mistake on my part. Leadership has an incredibly big influence on your career. I've had some really good ones, and I've also had some that were not great. And the impact emotionally and logistically when you have a negative experience is just not worth the other things like the great company, the money, the role. So really pay attention to that. And you've probably heard this quote, people leave managers, not companies. The following is an American statistic again, but I suspect we'd find similar statistics here. A comprehensive 2015 Gallup employee engagement survey titled The State of the American Manager found that 50% of Americans have left a job to get away from their manager at some point in their career, which means that half of the people saw their boss as the #1 reason for leaving a job. Culture Amp, another company, their data showed something slightly different. Their data showed that the percentage of people whose decision to leave an organization was driven by a manager or pay was roughly even. So it was either pay or a manager at 12 or 11% respectively. Leadership was more than double that at 28. So a manager had a smaller effect than leadership overall. And development opportunities came in at a whopping 52%, dwarfing the other factors as the primary factor for deciding whether to leave. I've actually seen both. I would agree that especially in my role, when I was in role as a leader in tech, I heard development opportunities as one of the most important aspects for people. So it's definitely something that carries a lot of weight. So what does all this mean, these statistics around good and bad managers and development? It means start by finding a company with good leadership. Then as you research the company further and you do interviews, make sure you ask about development opportunities as well. Here are some ideas and some approaches based on my own experience and a 2018 article called How to Retain Female Talent in Technology, what she really wants according to gender-based researches, and also my perspective as a woman in tech. That was written by Isabel Neo. So how to find and recognize a good leader who is aligned with your values. Some questions you can ask at the interview stage. Does your company provide flexible hours and an option to work from home if necessary? Does your company have an inclusive recognition system that is well thought of? Does your company have a purpose? How does senior management live and breathe that purpose every day? Then you can check whether that purpose aligns with you and your values. Does your company have internal initiatives or groups, especially for female employees? And then if you're asking that at the interview stage, you can also, once you're working for a company and assuming you've got a good leader, ask the leader to support you in various ways. So first you can ask to have one-on-ones if that's not already a standard part of the company process. You can do that minimum bi-weekly. I would suggest no less than every 2 weeks. And then also make sure you and your leader prioritize them, because it's one thing to schedule them, it's another to make sure that they happen. In those one-on-ones, ask things like, when you want the flexibility to work from home, ask for it. Some research done by the Wall Street Journal on how men and women see the workplace differently found that 36% of women say they do more work at home and only 7% say they do less. So they actually prefer to work at home. So if that's important to you, don't be afraid to ask for it. Ask for access to senior management. In her article, Ms. Neo says, for a woman, access to senior management means access to valuable insights and an opportunity to talk about her work, and she gets feedback on it. It also increases her visibility and it opens up opportunities that she may not have if she's just putting her head down and working hard. Your sponsor should be a version of this for you, which we'll cover in a little while. And ask for recognition. So if you accomplish something great and your manager is not already naturally doing this, ask to have your accomplishments attributed and amplified, shared with your team or other senior management, as well as recognized through bonuses, promotions, and broader opportunities. Then, to address the question of development opportunities, identify what you want to learn and develop. Ask yourself if the company or role are ones that will give you the opportunity to develop that knowledge and those skills. And then talk to people who work or have worked with the company. Read reviews online on sites like Glassdoor to hear people's actual experience of those development opportunities. Sometimes there are theoretically good development opportunities available, but the culture of the company is such that it makes it difficult for employees to actually take the time to work on their development. Or sometimes the company lacks the supports to provide employees with the feedback and supportive structure to know what would be best for them to work on, so they aren't able to develop in areas that matter. When I was in one of my roles in tech, that was one of the things I noticed the most with my reports is they didn't even know what to choose to develop because they didn't have a strong enough sense of their own skills. And so a big part of my role with them in our one-on-ones was to reflect back the things that I thought they were really strong at and could build on, and then also one or two things that would help position them for advancement with the company that they could develop. And once you're in a role, ask your leader in your company to point you to the development resources. Make discussing your development and getting your leaders to support and give you feedback a standard part of your one-on-ones. Tip number 2, to really flourish in your career, and particularly in tech, it's crucial to build a wide and diverse support network for yourself. Looking back, I realized that I personally went it alone for way too long in my career, and I missed out on the opportunity to support, to get the support, the wisdom, and the companionship that finding and building a tribe around me could have provided. Here's what the ideal tribe should be made up of, in my opinion. Your tribe should consist of 4 buckets. 1, at least 1 mentor. 2, a sponsor. 3, a personal advisory board that's made up of diverse groups of people. And lastly, 1 or more communities. I'll cover those all one at a time to explain what they are, where they differ, and where they overlap, and to help you understand how to find them and how to make the most of your time with them. So let's start with the mentors. What does a mentor do? A mentor advises and supports in their area of expertise, which is typically the area of expertise that you're working in. They are typically people who have done the work that you're doing, have more experience in your discipline, potentially also your role, and can help give you feedback and point you to resources that help you grow and learn. Where to find them? Company programs and leaders can help you identify mentor programs, or can be candidates themselves. Associations and alumni from your university are candidates, and just recos from your network, word of mouth. You can ask people for suggestions. And then once you find them, you just ask them. And if they say yes, great. And if they don't, you move on to the next person on your list, and you don't take it personally, because it's probably more a reflection of just their availability. How to interact with them. Once you have a mentor, schedule one-on-ones. The frequency can be anywhere from once a week to once a month to on call as needed. That's really up to the 2 of you. What I would suggest is to make sure that you have a minimum, though. So you have something pre-scheduled at least quarterly, for example, to make sure that you do stay in touch and it doesn't fall off your radar. But mentors alone are not enough. According to research from the Center for Talent Innovation, CTI, 85% of women and 81% of multicultural professionals need help navigating and advancing their careers, but receive the support less than Caucasian men. A 2010 Catalyst study showed that more women have mentors than men, but 15% more men still won promotions. And on closer examination, they found that though mentors help advise and support you, mentorship doesn't lead to advancement. But having a mentor who is in a position of influence over your career, aka a sponsor, does. So what is a sponsor? A sponsor is a senior leader who advocates for, invests in, and influences your career. They essentially make you their protege. The Diversity and Inclusion area of SLAC, the National Accelerator Laboratory, a United States Department of Energy national laboratory operated by Stanford University, provides a detailed list of the differences between mentors and sponsors on their site through their one-pager called The Key Role of a Sponsorship for Diverse Talent. As well as they also provide these 3 tips for how to identify prospective sponsors and choose the best candidate for you. So here are 3 questions that they suggest, adapted by me, so that they can help you find a sponsor. First, who makes the pay, promotion, or project assignment decisions that affect you? So your manager does, but there's also someone at a higher level that does that, or even in a different department. Which senior leaders, number 2, which senior leaders could benefit from your career advancement? And the reason for that question is that would be a motive for them to want to be a sponsor for you. Third, which senior leader has a network or platform most equipped to help you advance in your career? You want people who are connected and can help move things along for you. Look at your list, identify all the people that fit all of those categories, and then choose the strongest candidate and ask them. If they say no, again, move on to the next and keep going until you find someone. And how to interact with them. Set up one-on-ones. Again, it can be once a week to once a month to on call. It can also be quarterly. Often sponsors are at a senior level, so it might not be realistic to meet with them as frequently, but you want to probably meet at least quarterly. And what you should be talking about is have discussions, tell them about your goals, help get their help establishing goals, set up a plan and decide what the actions should be. They're really the ones who are going to help guide you in what would be valuable for you to be spending your time to move forward. Third, an advisory board. What is it and what do they do? So it's really a collection of people. They provide diverse and complementary skills and background. Think of them as a collection of supporters and mentors. The person or people in your mentor category could be considered part of your advisory committee, but you could also have other people in there that you don't necessarily consider mentors. They're more advisors. So how do you find them? You want to choose people who will provide 3 main things. 1, support and encouragement by being cheerleaders. 2, provide more knowledge and experience in an area that you already have some experience in. And 3, provide knowledge, experience, and exposure to areas that are gaps for you, but are also very important now or for the future that you envision. So I'll give you an example. If you're graduating in computer science and you're taking an entry-level role as a junior software developer with a financial startup, but you have no experience in startups or in finance, your advisory board can include people like, for the support and encouragement and cheerleader category, a person who you've had an experience with they're unfailingly supportive, they're positive, they're encouraging, they're empowering, even if they have no skills similar to the skills that you need for your role. You can meet with them when you need to pick me up or you just need to feel empowered. For the second category, people who have knowledge and experience that's further along in your area, you can choose someone like a senior software developer if you're taking a role as a junior developer. And for people who have knowledge, experience, and exposure to areas that are gaps for you, but are also important now or in the future, you could pick someone who has or is working in a startup or in finance, because that will help you fill the gaps that you've got in those areas. A good way to think of this is to do an inventory of all areas where you feel imposter syndrome or self-doubt and look for a person who you feel would provide support for you in that area. Since your advisory board is essentially a collection of mentors, like mentors, you can find them in places like company programs and leaders, associations and alumni, network recos, and just looking around in your life. And then just meet with them one-on-one, once a month, twice a year, and use your time to do rapport updates, challenges, goals, and reciprocate. Lastly, communities. These are groups that you can relate to, support, amplify, celebrate, join, and hold accountable. How to find them. Search a topic area like software development, developers, computer science, and then search also for communities, meetups, and associations, ERGs, associations, alumni, network recommendations. And again, meet with them in a group, do some breakout one-on-ones, meet with them once a week to once a month to ad hoc and use the time for discussion, for asks, for offers, for learning, and for leads. So to recap, you should build a tribe that includes those 4 buckets. Tip 3, grow your financial freedom. You want to be ready for all eventualities, including downsizing, needing to leave because the role has changed, limited opportunities, a poor fit. You also want to have the option to leave, not for bad experiences, but to move towards good ones, like starting your own venture, having a child, going on a world tour, retiring early. Financial freedom might feel really far away right now. You might be thinking you've just graduated, or you're interning and that you're just happy to have an income and pay your bills and have a little left over to go out with your friends. But it's really, really important to be thinking of it now. Here are some ways you can do that at this point in your career. Maximize your pay when you're taking a role. Negotiate. Consider the potential when you take a new job. Consider things like whether a startup has a strong chance of being acquired, of going public, or whether you could get options that could appreciate significantly if that happened. Don't leave free money on the table. Consider company perks like employee matching programs and options. A good sized portion of the financial freedom I have today came from things like payouts from a startup that was acquired, options that I've bought into. I've participated in matching programs and things like that. So I really, really recommend it. Too many women don't take advantage of these programs. They're literally available at their company and they don't take advantage. So make sure you do. And then put your money to work for you. Be your own wealth manager. Put 20% of every paycheck, have it automatically deducted, invest it. Forget about it, just invest it and forget that it even exists. And with the remainder of your pay, have short-term and mid-term savings, and then also treat any unexpected money as money you never got. Just invest it and forget it. Returns from your tax return, bonuses, and you'll soon find your money accumulating and compounding. So to recap, the 3 tips in your toolkit to fight imposter syndrome and unblock your path to wealth, to your path to actions that will lead to financial freedom are, I'm so sorry. Yes, here we go. So 3 tips to flourish in tech. 1, work for a good leader in a company with developmental opportunities. 2, find your tribe, mentor, sponsor, advisory panel, and communities. And 3, grow your financial freedom so you can leverage the good in tech and feel free to leave if you encounter the bad of tech. Part 3, a tech career is just a small part of a bigger, more beautiful whole, your whole life. You're here today because you've decided to study tech, and chances are to make your career in tech. You're probably pretty excited about that. I understand. I transitioned to tech for the same reason, and there is a lot to be excited about. But a career in tech is just one part of a larger, more important whole life that also includes these other kinds of categories from the coaching tools company, Wheel of Life. Our life is more than just our career. And when we're starting our career, it can feel like the most important thing, the shiny, bright thing that outshines everything else. We can tend to get so focused on it and on getting that degree, getting the job, getting the role, that we forget to think of our context of our whole life. And it's really important to think of that, because otherwise we might make choices of careers or companies or roles that don't support what we want in other areas of our life. For example, you might end up working for a company whose location is nowhere near a beach, if, like me, your passion is beach volleyball, or a company with a poor family leave policy when you'd like to have children one day. We can't focus on all the parts of our lives at once, but we can grow our awareness of how full our life is in each area by doing an inventory and then consciously attend to the areas that are out of balance. So yes, her again, you had a feeling she'd be coming back, didn't you? So how do we do this design a whole life thing and attend to that out of balance thing? A mini toolkit to design a whole life you love and that loves you right back. 1, do a whole life inventory and attend to those areas that are out of balance. 2, prioritize physical, mental health, and then financial freedom. 3, join a community for support and accountability for undernourished life areas. So the first one, do an inventory and attend to imbalances. Let's start with that one. And I see that we're getting close to time, so I'm going to wrap this up as quickly as I can. If you've done this before, if you haven't done this before, you might be wondering things like, what should this inventory look like? What should you track on it? How should you use it? It doesn't need to be complicated. To illustrate, I'll share an example of a simple, rough one that I've created and used for myself on the fly on a whiteboard that I have at home. So remember this? I do my own simple version on a mini whiteboard I have with dry erase markers. Here's how I do it, and you can too. First, I identify the categories. For the categories, I use ones similar to the ones on the visual that you just saw: health, money, friends. I make them words and categories that are meaningful to me. So I would suggest you do that too. For example, I like to use purpose instead of career. I also like to separate friends and family. Make it your own. Then I fill in the slices of the pie with colors and degrees. And so I fill the slice based on how full that area of my life feels compared to how full I'd like it to be. For you, for example, if you wanted full-time work, but you were only working part-time, you might fill it only part-way. I use colors green, orange, red to identify how content I am with that section of my life. So something could be very full. For example, you could have lots of friends, but it might feel orange because it's not feeling as good to you as you'd like it to be. For example, if you're not getting enough quality time with your friends, or if you have less in common with your friends now than you used to have. Then I add notes. Inside the colored parts, I put the notes about the existing state of things. And outside of it, just above the colored part, I put what I feel is missing and what I'd like to bring in. Lastly, I assign a priority to each category based on the degree of focus I want to put on each area of my life. It's usually not realistic to focus on all areas at once, so I suggest picking one or two. And I tend to focus not just on the color and the size, but on which one feels the most important to me. So for example, it could be that an area of my life, like category 1 at the center left, let's call it health, is only half orange compared to the almost full red category 3. Let's say that's friendship. But that for where I'm at in my life and what is a priority for me right now, I want to focus on health to avoid that becoming a major concern later in life. So then I would go and I would mark the actions that I plan to take to address the imbalances next to the bullets where I identified what was missing. And then I would try to see if I could address several areas at once. So for example, I could focus on doing get-togethers with my friends that also support my goals to improve my health, like getting together for walks and for sports. Tip 2, first health, then financial freedom. In the last slide, you heard me use health as an example of an area I made a priority. That wasn't just an example. It's actually what I believe should be our top priority. I believe in focusing first on our health, mental and physical, because without that, we don't have the energy or wellness to show up for the other parts of our lives, including our careers. And it's an area that you can also use to address several other parts, like I just explained with the sports. So if we join a sports team, we can get more fit. We can also help our mental health, and we can make new friends and share the experience with existing friends, for example. After health, I believe we should make working towards becoming financially free as soon as possible a top priority, because next to health, being financially free is the most important, especially for women. And lastly, tip 3, join community. Yes, community shows up here again as one of the top 3 too, and for good reason. It's a critical part of building a wonderful life. It helps build support and accountability to nourish the areas that are undernourished before they begin to cause us pain. Community connects us, celebrates us, inspires us, supports us, creates accountability, and helps us access the resources to achieve our goals and help us not feel alone. It's critical to a whole, happy, fulfilling life. Find your community using the tips I provided in the Find Your Tribe section earlier. Recap, do a whole life inventory, attend to the areas that are out of balance. 2, prioritize physical, mental health, then financial freedom. 3, join community for support and accountability for the undernourished areas. And at the start of our time together, I told you the 3 things you'd learn over the course of our hour together. To recap them, financial freedom is not just a nice to have, but crucial for women, and tackling imposter syndrome with compassion is key to achieving financial freedom. Because if you don't see and believe you are awesome, it's more likely that others won't either. And because then you won't believe you deserve success and financial freedom, so you won't expect it or go after it. You won't do things like go for the job, go for the promotion, ask for the raise, leave the places that don't serve you. Second, the tech industry is great, and it can be hard for women. Supportive connections and communities are keys to thriving and being happy in tech. And third, a tech career is just a small part of a bigger, more beautiful whole, your whole life. Inventory your life to grow your awareness of what you want and what brings you joy. Join a community with the same vision for different areas of your life for support, accountability, and celebrating wins. Now go get that incredible life. Thank you for letting me share my experience and learnings with you today. Please reach out and connect with me. If you do that, please include a note saying that you attended this webinar. I don't usually connect with people I haven't met, so that will make sure that I can connect with you. And also connect with me through LinkedIn that way, and then also through Facebook if you'd like. I have a Financial Phoenix Rising page, which is the bi-weekly interview series I do with women who've gone from disadvantaged to financially free situations, and also with financial experts. And also sign up for my email subscription list if you'd like. It's free, and I'll send you my top 10 favorite list of resources to help you thrive in tech and in life, to find community and to achieve financial freedom as a woman. And now I'd be happy to answer any questions in the time we have left.
Thank you so much for that talk, Natalie. It's super inspiring. A lot of your talk resonates with me, being one of the biggest imposters probably in this room. Suffered from that my whole life. And I have to agree that talking about it and learning about it really freed me to find out that other people feel the same way that I do as well. I love all of your tips, and I love your love of community, because I think that's so important, to find a community that you can share with, and to have a group of women, especially women, to build yourself up a little bit and to talk yourself out of some of these imposter things. I know that you've done that for me actually already in the very short time that we've known each other. Surprisingly enough, I think the first time that I met you, you had a major influence in my life. So thank you for that. And I also really loved your points about people leaving managers, not companies. And I think it's so important for us to surround ourselves with people that we like to be with. We spend a lot of time in our careers with people, not just managers, but with other people. And if you're not enjoying the people that you're with, you're not going to enjoy your job, right? So I loved that part as well. So thank you so much for that talk. We do have a question in the chat. And the anonymous poster asks, could you please explain how imposter syndrome is different from perfectionist? Because perfectionist people suffer from similar concerns and mostly have performance anxiety and underestimate their achievements. And what is the difference that causes us to differentiate perfectionism from imposter syndrome?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm happy to answer it, having suffered from both. So what I would say, I'll just share how I think about it. I think imposter syndrome for me is a failure to recognize the facts and to integrate the facts. So I think for me, when I feel like an imposter, despite all the evidence that shows, so if I feel an imposter at something, a role, I'll just use community building. It's not an area that I have imposter syndrome about. I feel quite good about that area, but if I did, despite all of the proof that I've done a lot of community building, it would be not very logical to feel that way. And so that to me is imposter syndrome, is when you feel like despite all the evidence that shows otherwise, you still feel like a fraud, and you feel like all those things have just been luck and not actually deserved or earned. Whereas I think perfectionism, how I think of perfectionism is, I'll just finish on the imposter syndrome. I think most of my career was in UX design and in UX and that kind of field in tech. And I had actually quite a lot of imposter syndrome about it, because when I first got into UX, there was no degrees in it. There was no, certificates. Now there's lots and lots of programs, but there weren't. Back then, we all just taught each other, and everybody who was in the field learned from reading and practicing and so on. So that lack of a degree in it, I had a degree, but not a degree in that, really fed the imposter syndrome. And that was despite constantly performing well in that role and ascending to higher level roles. So that would be an example of imposter syndrome. And perfectionism, how I think about perfectionism, I've actually gotten to the point, I used to see it as a quality. I used to think it was something to aspire to. And now I actually see it as something that's really harsh towards ourselves. Actually, it's really something I intentionally try not to be, because I think it has two negative effects in my mind. One is it makes me be really hard on myself. If I'm being a perfectionist, I'm not allowing myself to show up human. I've got some kind of really high expectation of myself that doesn't allow me to just fail and make mistakes and be human and be vulnerable. And the result of that is, first of all, it's impossible. And then it pushes me to be very driven. And then that energy doesn't feel good to me and to others. And then the other thing is that showing up as a perfectionist, what I've realized about that, both when I've experienced and when I've shown up that way, is that I actually think it's the opposite of bonding for humans, because when you show up perfect, it can create this feeling of imposter syndrome in the other person. Like, not that we make people feel things, but if I show up with like all my perfection, then the other person might feel like they also need to show up perfect. And then we're both just trying to be perfect. And that can set up for competition, and it can really reduce closeness. Whereas if I show up human, vulnerable, with my imperfections, also with confidence, but also with my humanity, it's not about having low self-esteem, it's just about being human, then that's a connection. People can relate to that, and it gives other people permission to show up imperfect, and then we get closer. So that's how I think of the two and how I think of them being different.
Great answer. Great answer. And I mentioned that I'm an imposter, but I'm certainly not a perfectionist. I've never been a perfectionist in my life. Getting the job done good enough has been always good enough for me.
Yeah.
But I suffer from, this the sort of feelings like I shouldn't be here, and everybody else is better than me, and et cetera, et cetera.
That's so hard. I'm sorry, Wendy. Those are tough feelings.
I'm getting over it. Once you reach my age, it doesn't really matter anymore. But seriously, finding out that other people feel this way was just so great for me to recognize that this isn't something that just I feel. But every time my boss would come into my office and say, we need to talk, and I worked for him for 25 years. Every single time when he would come in and say, we need to talk, the first thought I had was, he's finally realized that I'm not good at this and he's going to fire me. Like, this went on for 25 years. Like, this is ridiculous. He was not going to fire me. And I knew that. Yeah, that was the first thing that came to mind every single time.
That's hilarious.
Okay, we have another really great question.
Just before the question, I just want to comment that I empathize with that so much. I think that lots of people feel that way. And I think it should be a standard part of leadership training 101, that when you call a person in for a meeting, you should say, you're not fired unless they're about to be fired.
I totally agree. Yeah, the things that he'd want to talk about was like, should we, submit a paper to a comp? Like, it had absolutely nothing to do with me, but that was where my mind went every single time. But this is a really great question, and I'm not going to read the question verbatim, but the idea of the question is, I assume that this is a student, because they're saying that they're thinking about postponing applying to tech jobs until next year because they don't feel that they have enough experience. And the plan was to learn online until then, and now they're wondering if they should just go for tech internships now and learn along the way. And do you think it's possible, or should I stick to my old plan?
Here's the thing, and there's a statistic out there. I'm going to assume this is a woman and asking this question, since most of the people in the audience are. But it's so common, especially for women. The research shows that women typically expect that they know 80% of a job to even apply or be deserving of a promotion, compared to, I think it's 60% or something, or even lower for men. And so often women will what basically it comes down to is they postpone their own wealth by doing things like, I'm not qualified enough, so I'm going to go back to school, which actually not only delays making money, it costs you money. No offense, I know you're a university and you've got to, but it does. So it's not to not do that. I've got a degree, but also before you tell yourself you need that, that's your imposter syndrome talking. And also, like, I think sometimes think of that statistic where men will more often go in and just say, I'll figure it out, and just fake it, right? Just do that. Just think of that and think, why should they get to do that and not us? I'm going to do that too. And I've literally heard from women who, after they heard that statistic, thought that and went and got the job or got the promotion because they didn't want to be part of that statistic. So I would say, how I got into UX, I didn't have experience in UX. I found a person who was a leader in UX. I asked for an information interview with them. I brought my resume and I sat down with them and I said, I'm really excited about this field. I really want to do it. I would love if you would look over my resume and look over what I'm bringing to the role and what I think are transferable skills or what I feel are fit and where you think there's gaps. And then I would love for you to tell me how important those gaps are and what you think I could do about them. And he was amazing. He literally sat down, gave me all the pluses, told me some books I could read. And then 2 weeks later, he called me back and said, hey, one of the best ways to learn is to try. Why don't you come do a contract for me? So I would say information interviews with experienced people in the field, do several of them. It gives you information. So again, evidence to make decisions on as opposed to just your own projections or your own imposter syndrome. Secondly, you're meeting people who know people and who have opportunities. So you might end up with a contract like I did too. And remember the other thing, enthusiasm is the most important thing. So I always think hire for enthusiasm over skill because you can train the skill, you can't train the enthusiasm. So show up super enthusiastic, super excited, ask for feedback, be ready to act on that feedback. Don't do things like delay making money and taking really poorly paid things because you think you're not qualified enough. And join those communities because they will reflect things back to you. Wendy and I, as we were talking, like we've in community been able to reflect positives to each other that help us kind of break through that imposter syndrome. So join communities.
And if you're going to delay until you feel like you have enough experience, you're going to be as old as I am before you start your career. So just go for it. Absolutely go for it. You will learn on the job. So I speak as a university professor. You don't learn everything that you're going to use on the job in university. You're going to learn on the job. You have the background, you have the ability to learn. Go for those jobs. Okay, don't wait. So I know that we're running short of time. So we do have one more question. Adele, what do you think? Should we continue on with questions or should we wrap it up? I'll leave it to you.
Sure. I'll do one more question and then we'll wrap it up from there.
So if people really have to go, feel free to drop off, but we'll go for the last question. So how do you find motivation in your job and everyday life? Sometimes I feel like I can only get motivated through exterior pressures and deadlines.
Yeah, what I would say with that is I would question whether this person is two things. I would just question whether there's like enough excitement about the work that they're doing and if they're in the right field for them, because ideally you would feel excited. But if it's both work and life, I would wonder if there's something going on around wellness and mental health and remember that health is the first thing to take care of. So I think taking care of our health, making sure we're not overloaded, making sure that we're eating well, we're sleeping enough, we're getting love and affection and closeness in our connections, making sure that we're doing things that give us a sense of purpose. Those things really help with motivation. And I would also look probably at, is there an area of loss going on in your life? Because sometimes that lack of motivation or lack of energy in life is actually, we don't consciously process it as this, but sometimes it's because there's been a big change in our life that makes it that nothing feels particularly exciting. So I would probably look more broadly than just at work, and I would think about what's going on. So back to that whole life, right? Do that inventory of the different parts of your life to be able to see it. And that might give you some ideas of what's going on. And then you can make a prioritization of what to focus on to get yourself back to a good place.
Okay, once again, thank you so much, Natalie, for all your wisdom and for coming to be here this afternoon with us. That was really great. So just a couple of last notes. I forgot to mention yesterday when we did the opening ceremonies, well, I deleted my slide somehow about next year's CAN-CWiC, but we're super excited to announce that we have a venue for an in-person event next year. It will be run October 21st and 22nd at the Delta Toronto Airport Hotel. So we hope to see everybody there in person to have a real life, like big group hug or something like that when we meet next year. So keep that in mind, put it in your calendars. And the last thing that I'd like to do, so one more thing, I guess, all these talks are going to be posted on the CAN-CWiC website. So direct your friends also to listen to the talks because they all were so terrific. The last thing I'd like to mention is a thank you to Adele and Renata, the organizing team, for putting together such a great conference this year. It was short, but very, very sweet. And that's pretty much it for us. So thank you all to all the attendees for coming, and have a great rest of the day. Bye.